Hi, my name is Rochelle and you're watching or listening to BoxBox F1 Pod. Welcome to the Imola Grand Prix race debrief. Honestly, it was a bit of a letdown after Miami. Never thought I'd say those words, but the high that Miami left us with just did not follow us to Europe. But there was still a lot going on and off track, and there were some key moments that obviously I want to discuss, especially those last 10 laps. Oh my God, edge of my seat. While I'm cooking, I'm going to be making aglio olio, which I don't want to try to say Italian because that girl got ripped apart on the internet when she tried to say it. And then I don't want to say it too American because that should also be equally ripped apart. So instead, I'm just going to be making garlic and olive oil pasta. Aglio olio. I have water boiling in the background and I'm going to be chopping up the garlic, and there is about a thing and a half clove is one, bulb, a thing and a half of garlic that I will be chopping up. And I have my cilantro here. I have my limoncello spritz here. And without further ado, it's time for the digital warm-up. Lap 1, F1 news. So Javi, Charles Leclerc's engineer, race engineer, who you probably know best as we are checking. One moment. Can I celebrate? No celebration. No, definitely not. Can I go to the bathroom? No bathroom breaks. No, you must stay in the car. That man is gone. And in his place is a man called Brian. And let me say what a refreshing change of pace Brian was when Charles could hear him. There was a bit of radio issues, but when Charles could hear him, Brian was supportive. Brian was encouraging. Brian, great guy. So I've got high hopes for Brian. Javi has been relocated somewhere in Ferrari, which I think was the exact same stuff they said about Mattia Binotto, who now lives on a vineyard. So don't know what's going to happen to Javi, nor can I say I'm particularly fussed. I'm sure there will be some sort of transitional period for Charles, who got very used to his engineer. And I know you have a very close relationship with your race engineer, but my God, it was time for a break. So bless up Fred for making this much needed change. In other news, Zach Brown gave an interview. In an interview, he said, I think there are 6 or 7 drivers on the grid who would be world champions with the Red Bull. As great as Max is, I don't think he would win the world championship in any car other than the Red Bull at this point. Okay. Okay, Zach. So, Max's first championship that he won was won in a car that was worse than, was definitely not the best car on the grid. And while the final race is under contention, he was neck and neck, like equal in points to Lewis, who had the best car on the grid at that time, when we got to the final race of the season. He may have dominated in the last 2 years without much competition, but today, while Lando gave him a run for his money, it was Max's actual skill and talent in a car that took him over the finish line, not the Red Bull. Because where was Checo's Red Bull? In P8. So let's relax, Zach. You can take a chill pill. I know you're like really feeling yourself right now, and good for you, but Max is still Max and he's still good. So Max, speaking of Max, he gave an interview to Bloomberg Business, because why not, I guess, about the hectic schedule that they have this year. And he said that if there was one thing he could change about F1 right now, it is the schedule. He was basically saying, like, I think we should be probably planning the schedule so that we're in the same part of the world at a time. So like all of the Asia, Australia races at the same time, all of the North America races at the same time, all the Europe is all squished together, which, you know, logically makes sense. But for some reason, the F1 planners don't necessarily see it that way. Max was saying that potentially, like, they think they won't sell as many tickets, like in America, for example, if it's like Miami, Vegas, and Austin all in one group or whatever. But they do Europe like that, and it's fine. So I don't know. I kind of agree. He was like you might be selling more tickets, but like, what kind of story are you telling from a sustainability perspective? Which I think can be equated not just to sustainability in terms of the environment, like going back and forth across continents for no reason. And I think it also could be viewed in terms of sustainability of a team and the driver's health. Like, surely the performance will be better and it's less damaging to the team to be traveling such long distances so frequently. Just chunk it up, you know? All right, lap 2, Sebastian Vettel. So Seb's back. For some reason, there was a video of him visiting Esteban individually. I don't know if there were clips of him visiting other people individually also, but I only saw a clip of him individually visiting Esteban. Esteban was like, you look good, you cut your hair, which he did. He looks much older now, but clean. He looks clean. And then Esteban's like, you lost a bit of neck. And he looked so self-conscious. Seb was like, oh yeah, I lost some neck. And he's looking a bit slimmer in that region. You know, they've got thick necks. But anyway, he was back in order to pay homage to Ayrton Senna, who passed away at the Imola racetrack in 1994. When I was born, or right after I was born. And he arranged like a track run, but I guess you could pick your mode of transportation. Some people ran, some people biked, some people scootered, Lewis Hamilton. It was F2 and F3, and like any of the worker team members, anyone could participate, but it was F1, F2, F3 that were all there. He got everyone to come out. It was very cute. There was a whole hullabaloo about Max not wearing the Ayrton Senna shirt that they were all wearing, but it seems that some of theirs were stolen, so he actually didn't have his. And also, no one made a fuss about the fact that Valtteri Bottas showed up in full biker's gear. Like, he was wearing his windbreaker, his goggles, his biker shorts. Like, he was in full swing. Like, this was the Tour de France. But anyway, so this was to pay respect to Ayrton Senna and Ratzenberger, both of whom lost their lives at the Imola track on the same weekend in 1994. And he gave this very wholesome speech saying that, like, we want to remember the best driver that ever was, and the fact that his and Ratzenberger's death unfortunately paved the way for us to be able to participate in the sport in such a safe way. And they stopped at the turns where the drivers had died. Why am I always crying? And it was just a very, very sweet moment. And I love that when Seb comes back, it's always for a wholesome reason. Like last year in Japan when he had like that bee activity for everyone and everyone showed up. Everyone shows up when Seb calls. And I think I don't know if this was on purpose, but there was, when they were taking a group photo, Seb seemed to run intentionally from where he was standing to a different spot in the picture. And it was right next to Logan, and I don't know if he's just being like, you know, his fatherly, mentory self and trying to make him feel supported, but it was, at least that was my interpretation, but I might be projecting a little on the fact that I just want Logan to be loved. All right, lap 3, trackside in Imola. So this was funny. All of the team principals went to dinner together. I think Stefan Domenicali, the F1 president, arranged it. It was really funny to see them all in a room together. Fred was fretting in a corner, like making a wild face in between a couple of them, like squatting on the ground. It was just a great moment. All right, so Max had a really funny interaction with a fan. He was talking about how when he was at a particular part of the track, this one fan flipped him off. And so he's like, so I gave him the finger back. And, you know, he learned. Next time I came around, he clapped. And then Oscar was like, you know, I had the same fan give me a thumbs down. And Lando started like saying something and Oscar was like, oh my God, you too? And Lando was like, no, they were cheering for me. And Oscar was like, did you sign with Ferrari and not tell anyone? What happened to you? But that was really funny. Also, I love that Oscar just assumed that it was the exact same fan that was giving him a negative reception, that was giving Max a negative reception. I'm pretty sure there's more than one fan there that was giving the two of you a negative reception. And then after the race, Carlos posted on his story about him, Charles, and Charles's dog Leo were walking around the paddock, and I guess Leo pooped in the middle of the paddock, and Charles was like, I do not have plastic bag. And Carlos was like cackling, and you can see Carlos Sr. in the background just like petting Leo, like not giving a fuck that there's just shit in the middle of the paddock. And then a Ferrari engineer or mechanic or whatever comes out with like 2 paper cups and like starts scooping up the poop. And I just thought it was hilarious because it was such like a bizarre way to collect this shit from the ground. And it just, I think, was really representative of the way Ferrari reacts when shit hits the fan. They just come up with the most bizarre responses. And maybe that's no longer a fair assessment of how they handle situations under Fred Vasseur's watch. But their reputation as of late is exactly that, trying to scoop up some soft shit from the ground with 2 paper cups. And then, but you just hear like Charles in the background going, no, Leo, not on the paddock. You can't do it here. I don't know what Charles' accent is when I do it. It's just an ambiguously non-American accent. Also, this was really funny. During one of this, like the fan stage events, it was the Mercedes one. I don't know what led to this being said, but George just said into the microphone that he would love to see Max and Lewis go for lunch, and was like giggling as he said it. And Lewis was like, oh yeah, maybe. And I just think it's really funny because it just shows George is there for the drama. George loves drama, and you know what I think would be great? I think he would love to join one of Charles's and Pierre's gossip sessions that they frequently have, where they just make the most shocked faces at each other. I don't know what tea they're spilling, but they always look flabbergasted, and I feel like George would really enjoy participating. He just loves the tea, I guess. So, he is British. Okay, moving on. So during the grid walk, I don't know if this was actually during the grid walk portion, but Lando was being interviewed by someone, and Max like ran up behind him to surprise Lando. And the interviewer was like, oh, Lando was just telling us about how he's going to overtake you when you guys start the race. And Max was like, oh yeah, he should. I just think it's funny because Max just wants to have fun. I think he's having more fun on sim, and he says he wants to win. But I think he wants to have fun again. So neither Brundle or Crofty were here this weekend. I think if they said it was because with 24 races on the calendar, they've like built in some breaks for themselves, which understandable. And this is like a double header, so that would be them talking 2 weeks in a row, and they probably need a break in between. But it was very weird to watch without hearing lights out and away we go. And also to not hear Brundle on the grid walk. We had this woman who was actually very competent and knew who people were and could engage in actual conversation, which was very strange. Just wasn't used to it. She talked to Hugh Grant, where she made a joke about the Kellogg's movie, and Hugh Grant was like, oh, that was very good. And she's like, wasn't it great? And he was like, well, it was almost very good. Very Hugh Grant response. Also, she said that she was like, oh, so you're with Ferrari here today? And Hugh Grant goes, I'm always rooting for Ferrari to win. I'm a Ferrari man. I think of them as the glamorous, classy team. Rather like me. Always humble, that Hugh Grant. Okay, pasta is in. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, whoa, I'm twisted. I am in my limoncello. I have a shot of gin I talk about this every time, but I'm just obsessed with them. From this gin company that my friend Matt got me for my birthday. It's called N Gin, Fuel the Dream, and it's just very apt for this current situation. And what's great is it is gin made in Italy. Kind of like Imola. All right, it would have been perfect if Lando won. Okay, garlic chopped. Let me just put it away, and then I'm gonna chop the cilantro. It's supposed to be parsley, but I don't have parsley. I have cilantro. And also I don't really like parsley. And also, like, ideally if I was making a small portion, making a big portion, but if I was making a small portion, I would have sliced this like very thinly, like but ain't nobody got time for that. So roughly chopped garlic it is. No, it still tastes like garlic, so. All right, moving on. The last thing that happened during the grid walk that was wild was Max was like being interviewed. He was walking forward towards where the Sky reporter was standing, and she's like, oh, here comes Max. And as they're walking forward, he's already doing an interview with someone. I think it was a journalist from Viaplay. And he's talking to this man quite enthusiastically, I might add. And out of nowhere, from behind the camera, a F1 official person comes barreling forward and just shoves the Viaplay journalist back and like away. Like he's just being escorted out, but like very roughly. And Max like looks around like very confused and like starts giggling out of confusion. He was like, huh? And then immediately launches into this interview with the Sky reporter. So he was just like staring in disbelief, giggled, and moved on like nothing happened. From what I understand, this man, I read somewhere he didn't have his grid sticker. He forgot his grid sticker, but I have not been able to confirm that anywhere. But also, even if that was the case, what an aggressive response for like no reason. But anyway, I think the biggest thing that happened during this Imola Grand Prix weekend was the fact that Max Verstappen participated in an 24-hour sim race at the Nuremberg Ring, virtually, obviously. He wasn't flying from Germany and back. And he was doing it in between sessions. So I think it started right after qualifying and it went on for 24 hours. And his sessions were designed so that he could participate in everything he was supposed to participate in, sleep for, I think he said he slept for like 6-7 hours, rejoined, finished his final stint, and then went to race. And he won the Sims race competition, which like, it's just comical at this point, but his team was joking as he was playing. They were like, so we're actually like a very supportive working environment, and we like to encourage our team members to participate in their hobbies on the weekend, which is why we allowed Max to head to Imola this weekend and race in the Grand Prix there. We hope he does well. And so he finished his stint and he's like on the live stream and he just goes, well, I'm off. And one of his team members jokes, he's like, where are you going? It's a Sunday. And he's like, exactly. It's a Sunday. I gotta go to work. And so then Max popped off of his computer and headed down to the track where he won the Imola Grand Prix. How often do you get like professional athletes who decide in their spare time, like I'm sure all the athletes, I'm sure NFL players play Madden, I'm sure football players play FIFA, but how many of them are world champions in the video game version of their sport? Few. And how many video game champions are champions in the real life version of what they're playing? Few. So I also have a friend, by the way, who's like a really successful gamer who just got a cat that's exactly like Max's cat. He's basically Max Verstappen minus the world championships. All right, moving on. Well, there was like a couple of really random things that I wanted to mention that didn't happen trackside in Imola, but Yuki turned 24 just before this, and I wish it happened on track. I wanted to see what kind of cake they would get him. I want to know how he celebrated. He tends to post like dumps a week or so after things happen, so hopefully in his next dump we'll get to see some birthday content, because I would love to see what kind of cake he's consuming. And sometimes these teams are like really trying to do social media and they just want to do like every trend they possibly can. And sometimes it works and sometimes it's like you need to relax. I saw someone being like, George is carrying the Mercedes social team on their back. Like I think Lewis just objectively refuses. And so poor George has to do like every freaking trend. And it's just, I'm sure he's enthusiastic to participate. It's just not really like not the easiest thing for him to do, you know? But this particular video made me laugh. It was the Kick Sauber team. They were talking about their car for the weekend. I think it's like got upgrades. And it was Valtteri and Zhou Guanyu doing the Pookie thing. And it was I'll link it, but I'm gonna play it so you can hear it.
Pookie is looking absolutely fire today.
Absolutely, 100%.
when you watch it, it's just really funny, the like faces they're making in the video. And whoever got Valtteri to say, Pookie is looking absolutely fire today, and then Joe going 100%. Like, it was highly amusing. And I really wonder if they met them last week at Miami. And that's why they got them to do it. Not sure. But anyway, everything's chopped. And with that, we conclude the digital warm-up. On to the race rhyme. You must make haste. Come on, Lando, pick up the dang pace. That was me with just 10 laps left in the Imola Grand Prix. But let's rewind it back to see how this situation came to be. We arrive in Italy still on a high from Lando's first win in Formula One. Will Imola deliver a race that's just as fun? While Leo Leclerc, Seb Vettel, and Hugh Grant were just some of Imola's charming guests, most of the action on track was subpar at best. Which brings us to the start of this very race rhyme. With 10 laps to go, it was Lando's time to shine. Maybe the car is worse, or he was tired from competing on sim all weekend. But for Max to win, right until the very end, he was forced to go full send. With 10 laps to go, Lando Norris was on fire and driving right on Max's tail. And had he but one lap more, we might have had a very different end to this tale. But alas, we hear the Dutch anthem once more. But this time, we had to earn it, so I don't mind the encore. Next week is all about the glitz, the glamour, and hopefully no curses. It's Monaco race week, baby. Let's see which victor emerges. Okay, on to analysis. So starting with qualifying, George only got like P6 or something, but for some reason he said that he did a terrible job during quali. And for the first time, gave a very interesting response, a response that I usually give for things, and said, wait for it, so funny. He said, I'm actually half a kilo too heavy this weekend myself. You don't think that's ever gonna make a difference, but half a kilo would have put me P5, which would be P4 on the grid. So I'm blaming my sandwich at lunch for that one. Which is what every woman on the planet does every single day. Or at least I do. I'm like, oh, I look bloated in this dress. It's the sandwich I had for lunch. Then Oscar finished P2, but ended up getting a 3-grid penalty for impeding Kevin Magnussen on the track. So I think he ended up starting P5 or something, but he still went through the whole situation. So he has a picture with Lando and Max post-qualifying. He posted all these pictures and wrote, "These aged well, fun while it lasted." He's so unserious on the internet, and it's actually my favorite thing in the world. Oscar online might actually be a close runner-up to Alex, and I always thought his social media presence was second to none. Now it might be second to Oscar. Also, Kevin, I don't know what's going on with him. He's like in this very like ID gaff era, but because of the situation with Oscar, he, along with Oscar, had to go see the stews. And he was asked about it after the ruling was made, but he had to go up to see the stews with Oscar. And his response was, it was nice to see the stewards again and make sure they are doing all right. It would be weird to go a whole weekend without seeing them. Just, first of all, not just his behavior on track that's like wild. It's also the way he reacts to it post-race. And it's also funny that he went to the stews with Oscar this time, because I remember Oscar specifically in his post-race interviews last week was saying that something needs to change, because if you are making certain moves in quali and then you get penalized for it, and for every single move you made when you had like 4, that 4 penalties, and you go, yeah, I deserved every single one of them. Something's wrong. He's like, you shouldn't be allowed to do things that you know is incorrect, but like somehow slides by, you know? So it's funny that they went together. I don't know what Kevin Magnussen is smoking these days, but it's like hilarious. Speaking of Haas behaving bizarrely, it seems that during Q2, Max inadvertently gave Nico a toe, which helped Nico get into Q3. And as a thank you, Nico was like, I'm going to give Max a toe in Q3, which helped Max get pole position over Oscar, which in the end wouldn't have mattered. But just hilarious in general. The description of it, I've linked the article in the show notes, but the description is, onboard footage of his best lap in Q3 showed that he got a slipstream down into turn 1 from Hülkenberg. The time gained from the toe likely handed Verstappen pole ahead of Piastri, given he was 0.2 clear of the McLaren driver in the first sector alone. Speaking to Sky Sports after qualifying, Hülkenberg said he decided to return the favor to Verstappen after the Dutchman helped him out in Q2. Max and I, we've been helping each other out this quali, he said. He helped me a few times in Q2, and I returned the favor here. So yeah, you need support from colleagues sometimes, don't you? Giving his side of the story, Verstappen described the situation as toe buddies, conceding he did benefit from Hülkenberg's toe down to turn 1. We were toe buddies out there, he said. Q2 already and Q3. I gave him a toe through 17 and he gave me a toe through turn 1 and 2. I think I did arrive a bit too quick for my liking because I did miss turn 2 a bit. So I did gain, I did lose a bit in 2. Overall, I think it did help me a little bit. But when struggling all weekend, you have to take all these little advantages to try and stay ahead. Hilarious. Just like, honestly, like, I don't know what the strategy sessions are like over at Haas, but they seem really keen on helping people in the weirdest way possible. Like, so Kevin's response every other week he's gotten a penalty was that, well, Nico needed my help, so I had no choice. And this time, not that Nico did anything illegal, but he was like, well, Max needed my help, so I gave him a hand. Just kind of makes me laugh. Anyway, the starting grid for the race was Max in first, potentially because of Nico's toe buddy situation, followed by Lando, Charles, Carlos, and Oscar in 5th due to his 3-place grid penalty for impeding Kevin Magnussen. In 6th was George because of his sandwich. In 7th was Yuki, followed by Lewis, Daniel, Nico, Checo, Ocon, Stroll, Alex, Gasly, Bottas, Zhou Guanyu, Kevin, and Logan because he had his lap time deleted, and Fernando because he's starting from the pit lane, and I forgot to check why. All right, moving on to the race. Honestly, there was more going on. There was more going on during the quali than happened in the race in general. Like, besides the last 10 laps, this race was so boring. So instead of doing like a proper debrief, because there's really not that much to talk about, instead I'm just going to do like a list of sort of my random observations. So first, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but Imola was sort of the race for upgrades. McLaren obviously had upgrades in Miami, and whatever they did to their car, it's like crack. Like, I don't know what is going on with that car, but I think it might be faster than the Red Bull. Like, today, no one can say that Max won because of his car. Cough, cough, Zach Brown. Like, Max won on pure skill and pure skill alone. We'll get that in a second. Ferrari apparently had some upgrades as well, but I don't think they're necessarily quite as noticeable as McLaren. Maybe I wasn't paying enough attention, but it almost feels like Carlos was driving worse this weekend. And the fact that Charles was, I mean, he's been top 5 this entire season. He also didn't have an appendix situation, but he's been top 5 all season. And I wonder if his performance today could at all be attributed to his new engineer encouraging him rather than crushing his soul. The other team I want to discuss is Williams. So the big talking point about Williams in the media over the last few weeks is the state of Logan's career next year, or even this year. And while I understand that his performance has been consistently subpar, last year there might have been more of an argument for getting rid of him. This year, considering his only benchmark being Alex Albon, has not delivered a single point for the Williams team yet, makes me think it's unfair to judge Logan, and instead of crushing his soul by giving away his chassis to Alex Albon every week, perhaps they should be building him up while the car is so bad that even Alex can't perform. And so maybe next year he could be in a better place. But I do want to say that Alex seems to be very supportive of Logan. Like I can't find the clip. I was going to link it, but there was a clip where Alex was on the radio, where Alex was giving advice to pass on to Logan's team. Like he's like, if Logan might be struggling a bit in like this turn, here's what he can do. He should try setting it up this way. And they're like, oh, thank you. They've taken this advice. And I just think it's really sweet that Alex is still trying to mentor and help Logan, even though his future seems so bleak. Like, at least there's someone in his corner. I used to think it was James Vowles. It's not James Vowles. At least Alex is there. And Logan just seems like a very wholesome guy. And I feel like perhaps Alex feels a bit of guilt for taking his chassis. Not that he necessarily should. It wasn't his fault. But, I mean, I would. So who knows? Speaking of Alex though, one of the funniest things the commentators said was like, as pit stops started happening a bit early, but as they were happening, one of them said, not lighting up the world, these pit stops, are they? And promptly after he said that, Alex pitted, and they somehow didn't screw on his wheel fully, his tire. So what ended up happening was that Alex left his pit stop, which was like very early in the race, and immediately slowing down and was like driving down the straight at like 5 miles an hour because they didn't screw his tire on fully. Like it was not fully screwed on, which is crazy. I think it was F2. One of the cars this race, that the car came in for a pit stop, tried to leave, and the tire popped off while he was still in the pit lane. Like, I don't know what's going on, what's in the Imola air, and why these pit stops are not lighting up the world. Anyway, moving on. There were some funny radios during this race. One of them was Max when in lap 51, GP says to Max that the main losses to Lando are in turn 2 and turn 6. And Max responds, yeah, but my tires don't work, mate. And GP was like, just giving you some information, Max. And Max goes, yeah, same for me. Just an exchange of information, guys. Let's all relax. It's so funny. GP and Max seem to have like actually a very good relationship, but they sound so tense on the radio. It's almost the opposite of what like a work relationship is, you know, where people like are able to put it on for the camera, and then as soon as the camera's off, they're like don't get along. I feel like it's the opposite for GP and Max, where the tensions are so high during a race that they just get angry at each other all the time. But then as soon as the race is over, they're like, oh, best friends. Some other funny radios that were happening during this race were Lando and his engineer. Lando gets told something about Max. I didn't quite catch it. And Lando goes, I see. And then Lando gets told that some people behind him are a bit slower on their tires. So he's like, okay. And Lando goes, yeah, but I have no pace. And he's just like perpetually sassy on the radio. Like the worst one was like during the last 10 laps. He gets told, Lando, you can push turn 9 a little harder. And Lando goes, I'm pushing as hard as I can, mate. Thank you. And the commentator goes, oh, how polite. It was definitely not polite. Lando is rarely polite on the radio. He's just exceptionally sassy. Just because he said thank you doesn't make this exchange polite. Ow. All right. So moving on to the last 10 laps, Max was definitely having some issues with this car. Not necessarily, I think it's just like, there wasn't like IQ issue, I guess, but there seems to be something perpetually wrong with the car that they haven't necessarily fixed. And Lando's car is very freaking good. Whatever Zach Brown has orchestrated over there at McLaren, it's working. But anyway, so Lando's car is so good. He's driving very fast. When the last like 15 or so laps hit, he's about 7 seconds behind Max, which is average. But that gap starts to freaking close and no one is expecting it. And so for the last 10 laps, literally everyone is sat on the edge of their seats. But for like me personally, and from what I've seen online, the way we're sat on the edge of our seats is different than the way we were sat on the edge of our seats in Miami, where everyone was so scared that like, at least I was so scared that a single movement, like a single hair moving on my head would somehow influence the way this race ends for Lando, that I was like sat still, just staring at the TV, petrified of making a move. This time there was a lot more like nervous anxiety, like the energy was just more nervous. I was like, I couldn't sit still. I was just so stressed. And I think the same sort of vibe was happening with the commentators, because 2 weeks ago, Brundle and Crofty like were terrified to say the words like Lando might win, and they were just like beating around the bush. Brundle, I've never seen him so nervous in my life. Like he was so stressed to say a word. Remember when he was like, Crofty, talk about anything else you can talk about, and Crofty was like, oh, it's the weather. Like, it was so stressful for everyone. And this time around, we have a race win in our pocket. So like we can talk about it a bit more comfortably. And the commentators are like, might this be a second win? It was not. I think that the fact that Lando's gap to Max kept closing and closing as the race came to a close was horrifying and exhilarating for everyone watching, because like, as I said, with 15 laps to go, it was like a 7-second gap. When Max and Lando crossed the finish line, the gap was 0.7 seconds. So he was really close. And there was like a point where I think it was like 0.3, but Lando made a mistake. He like swerved a little bit and he lost time, which put Max ahead. And if it weren't for that mistake, I think there actually might have been a chance that Lando would win. And they crossed the finish line. And I think like, honestly, this particular race really demonstrated Max's skills, because he didn't win because of the car. There is like no way you can argue that this win came because of the car. Like, especially because judging from the fact that Checo qualified in P11 and finished P8, the car was shit. It's the person driving the car that's making the difference. And Max has also been complaining about this car since Miami. And Max has barely complained about the car in like a year and a half. So the fact that he's complaining means not all is right. And I don't know if it's because Adrian Newey's leaving, so he's just like he has like senioritis and he's just like not interested in building anything of substance anymore. But there's the fact that the car might not be as good. There's also the fact that, I don't know if I'm allowed to point this out. I haven't seen anyone else point this out, so maybe I'm just imagining things. But I think the fact that Max was participating in the 24-hour sim race made a huge difference, because like, yes, they let him sleep. He slept for 7 hours. And during the post-race conference, Lando was like, well, I was up watching the fight, so it's not like I slept that much more. But I think sort of sitting in a chair, tense, competing, like that sort of mental space and also the way your body is positioned is not necessarily prime for best performance. Like when I sit for 10 hours a day at work, I don't like come off and be like, I'm ready to compete in a high endurance sport, you know? Like, it's not like that's where my body's at. And I don't think Max necessarily was at his top form because he was sat in a chair gaming for half of this weekend. Not that he doesn't like watch TV or game occasionally every other day, but I think also the emotional stress of being in a competition like that does make a difference. But also I think combined with the car being not at its best, combined with his body not being at its best, and add on to that the McLaren is so fast and Lando was so good, he had to work so much harder. And in the post-race conference, he was literally like lying flat on his back. And the commentator was like, or the interviewer was like, so how do you feel? And he was like, I want to go to bed. My back hurts. I'm tired. The car was bouncing a lot. I don't want to be here. Like, he was not feeling his best. Like, I've never seen him like fully just like lie flat on his back at this point, you know? He was also just tired. Like, I feel like he's just emotionally and physically tired. But I will say, despite him being so tired, I've never seen him so happy. Like, after Miami, he was thrilled. This time he's thrilled. And you know why? It's because he's competing again. And he can say all he wants, that he wants to continue dominating and he wants to continue winning. Of course he wants to keep winning. But he's a racer. He's a racer unlike anyone else on that grid. Because as you can tell, in his off time, what does he do? He races. He races online. He's racing in a car on a road, or he's racing digitally. Like, he never stops racing or thinking about racing or strategizing about racing. Like, it's all about racing for him. And you know what he reminds me of? He reminds me of Tashi from Challengers, minus the like love triangle and like diabolical character arc. And every other sense of the word, Max is Tashi, because all Tashi cared about was some great tennis, and all Max cares about is great racing. Did we ever think I was going to be comparing Max to Zendaya? No. All right, so post-race, I thought it was really cute that GP's radio to Max was, congratulations, I believe this is 2 wins for you in a day. And Max actually sounded happy on the radio. Like, you know how like last time I think I was saying that like Max says things because he sounds like he's supposed to say things. This time he was like, oh yeah, great weekend. This was really hard, guys. Like, we really had to work. Also, Lando got driver of the day, and he said on his radio when he came in that it was so much more painful to lose now that he knows how to win, which is kind of sad, but it's also nice. Max got out of his car and like he jumped onto his team in a way that I haven't seen him do before, and I don't know if it's because he had fun today or if it's because he saw Lando crowd surf his team last week and he's like, I want to do that too. Anyway, during the post-race interviews, like in front of the podium, they all talked, they all were excited. Max looked tired, Lando looked happy but defeated. Charles was Charles, and it was funny because his mic wasn't working for half the interview, which was like very symbolic of this entire weekend, because I think his radio wasn't working for half of the race also. And it's really funny to listen to the recording because it's him going, I can't hear you. And his engineer's like, I also cannot hear you. Not also, because he's like, whatever you're saying, I don't know what you're saying. And Charles was like, I cannot hear you. And then he literally went, ugh. And I think at one point he was imitating the noises he was hearing on the radio. The cool down room was fun. They were debriefing as they always do with Max. Lando was like, my launch was mint. And then, ... They just always debrief really hard when Max is there, and I love that. All right, so driver of the day was Lando, and I think it was very well deserved, but I also think actually Max deserves driver of the day this weekend, unlike every other weekend, because this time he really showed us his skills. And not only that, he won 2 races. So it really demonstrates that the racing, he has the mind and the strategy that's just like out of this world. And I just think it deserves recognition. So in my mind, Max is actually the driver of the day today, but I think Lando deserved it just as well. He was really, really close to Max. And the dick in the box was probably just that the rest of the race sucked. It was just really boring. So the final results of the Imola Grand Prix are as follows. Max, Lando, Charles, Oscar, Carlos, Lewis, George, Checo, Lance, Yuki, Nico, Kevin, Daniel, Esteban, Guan Yu, Pierre, Logan, Valtteri, Fernando, and Alex DNF'd because his car ended up just giving up. The current standings in the Drivers' Championship are Max with 161 points, Charles with 113, Checo with 107, Lando with 101, Carlos with 93, Oscar with 53, George with 44, Lewis with 35, Fernando with 33, and Yuki with 15, rounding up the top 10. Love Yuki. And the Constructors' Championship are as follows. Red Bull with 268 points, Ferrari with 212, McLaren with 154, Mercedes with 79, Aston with 44, Visa Cash RB with 20, Haas with 7, Alpine with 1, and Williams and Kick Sauber both with 0. But Williams has more 0 than Kick Sauber, I guess. They're 9th. Anyway, that's it for the Imola Grand Prix. In case you're curious, can I touch this? Nope. Well, this is the pasta. Aglio e olio. I don't know if you can see that. It looks good. So, that was it for the Imola Grand Prix. The best way to keep up with the schedule is actually to follow Oscar Piastri on Twitter, particularly his genealogy journey. on Twitter. Before China, he tweeted that his great-grandfather was like 3/16 Chinese. And before Imola, he tweeted that whether now was a good time to mention that he's part Italian. Also like a small amount, but more than the Chinese. Today he tweeted, searching my family tree to find any trace of Monegasque roots. And Charles replied, I can adopt you if needed. 10 out of 10 exchange. And everyone keeps making memes of Charles's children, and it's just Leo and Oscar. Anyway, next up is Monaco, the home race of Charles and now Oscar. It's just in a few days' time because we're in a double header. So make sure you subscribe. Are we in a triple header? I hope we're not in a triple header. Wait. Hold. We're not in a triple header. It's a double header. Before the week is out, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, share with any potential boxes, leave a comment if you can. It would mean the world to me. And of course, follow me at BoxBoxF1 on social media, BoxBoxF1 Pod on social media to keep up in between races. And always my DMs and email is open to your thoughts, opinions, questions, anything. Love to chat. Until next week, Box.